A quick word on Dr. Don Paris. He'll be with us for 45 minutes here. He's an author, a musician, and a spiritual scientist. He's not a person that's new to us. He's been there for GCSs with us. So we know him, and he has been working in the field of radionics and spiritual science for the past 30 years, training people in over 35 countries around the world in this field.
As soon as my presentation comes up here, I will start a journey, because what this is all about is not a study or an experience as much as it is a journey. What we're talking about with quantum is something that is part of everyday existence. We are living in a quantum reality. But what does that mean? What does it mean to be in a quantum reality? So what I would like to do this afternoon is show you how we're living in a quantum reality and what you can do to expand your awareness of that, and then use that to not only your advantage, but also to everyone's advantage. Can I get my first slide, please? He's working on it. So I'll go ahead and start talking about this, and the slides will come up. There are several different interpretations. Now, I know a lot of you are new to this concept of what quantum reality is. This idea of quantum has only come up into the general public in the last 20 years. Even though the science is older than that, the awareness into the public has lagged behind. But there are different interpretations about what quantum is, and I'd like to share with you what that is so that you can understand a little bit more. What is quantum? Why does everybody talk about quantum? Did you know that there's more than one universe? How many people think there's one universe? That's why they call it the universe, right? Universe, one verse. Well, in quantum, we think that there's an infinite number of universes, at least according to the parallel universes interpretation of what quantum physics is. So this was discovered or developed, this concept, by John Wheeler and his student, what's his name? Oh, those names, you know. Everett. Yes, Everett. They developed this concept that we don't live in one universe, we live in a multiverse, as many universes as you could possibly imagine, but only one slice of that is the one that you're perceiving and is manifest at this moment. But that doesn't mean the others don't have valid existence. We have a range of universes that we exist in. So, do we all live in the same universe? I have to say at this point in my experience, the answer is no. I'm living in my universe, you're living in your universe, and our universes are co-resonating so that we can experience each other's universe, but we're not in the same universe. Yeah? Does that make sense? Each one of us is developing and holding with our own energy field our own universe. And then we co-resonate with others that are in similar vibrational rates. So according to the parallel universes concept, we can make a quantum leap from one universe to another universe. And that's where the magic comes in. That's what's so exciting about this. The new concept of quantum is that we're not stuck in our universe or in an universe, in one single universe. We can start to expand our consciousness and perceive a different universe, the one that we want to perhaps be in, and we can jump from one universe to another universe. And this has happened to me many times. The Sec-5 1000 is technology. It's a radionics technology that will help individuals to change their reality. Now, when we talk about quantum, we talk about healing. Realistically, the best healing is when you move from one universe where, let's say, there's a disease or a sickness, into another universe where that is not happening, where there's health, vitality, and wholeness. And so that's what we do with the Sec-5. One of the techniques that we use is to go back in time right? Time is also a dimension like space. We go back in time to the point when the disease first began, that inception point. And that inception point is much easier to clear the energy around that inception point than it is 20 years later when the disease is full-blown. So we use this type of technology, this scalar technology, to go back in time and find that exact moment when the disease started, and then we clear the energy and the information at that point, and then it just naturally rolls forward on the timeline and creates a different reality. It moves the consciousness, the awareness, and the person into a new reality state. This is an experiment we did with some seeds. These seeds were just planted in the same row box, but they were not given any new information at all. So the seeds down below, we used the Sec-5 and we imprinted information. Now there's no energy, it's just information, and we told these seeds that they had more nutrition, they had more sunlight, they had more energy to grow, life force energy, and you can see for yourself. These grew in the same amount of time as these did on the top. They grew without any extra external chemicals or fertilizers or anything different in the physical world. But in the other dimensional world, we fed them new information. And in my workshop, I will go through on Monday how information is the primary force that comes before energy, before manifestation, and before physical reality. Oh, let me go back one. This is another experiment. Now, in this experiment, what we did was we took some holograms, and I'm going to explain a little bit about holograms and what they are and what you can do with them and where that idea came from. We imprinted these holograms with some informational fields to keep the fruit fresh. Now, can you see the difference between the fruit that has the holograms and the fruit that didn't have the hologram? They both sat for the same amount of time. I think it was 10 or 12 days. And the ones that have the holograms on them, to keep their energy field intact and the life force intact, are still fresh. And the one that didn't is completely starting to shrivel up and turn colors. Just some ideas, experiments. Now this one is an experiment. Can you click the mouse for me on there? That'll start the film. We did an experiment with some water. And what we did was we energized the water first, and then we put cut flowers into 2 vases. Now, one was not energized. So you'll see we have normal tap water on the left-hand side, and then it's time-lapse photography. Now it's 48 hours, 60 hours, 72 hours. It's holding up pretty well the same. In the charged water side, you'll see on the right-hand side, the flowers, after about 144 hours, are still strong, and the tap water flowers are starting to wilt down. Oh, finally we lost one here on the right, but the rest of them are holding up. And 228 hours, 240 hours, you can see the difference. Now, this is the type of science that we need to show that this kind of other dimensional type work, now there was nothing in the water other than new information. We just imprinted the water with vitality. What is vitality? Life force. There's energy. So we're going to see a top view here in a second. You can see what happened after 11 days. These flowers on the left were completely still open and bright and excited about life. The other ones using normal tap water. Now, it was the same tap water to begin with. We just energized it with some information. And it lasted about 25% longer. So these are just some ideas. Now, that's just to get your attention. So do I have your attention so far? Okay. Now I want to explain the difference between Newtonian physics, and this is not going to be difficult, I'll make it fun. Newtonian physics, quantum physics, string theory, and informational fields. This is the progression of where physics has come. Now, Newtonian physics is called that because of Isaac Newton, and he discovered most of the fundamental laws of gravity, like every force in one direction has an equal and opposite force in the other direction. And much of science, a huge portion of science until the last 25 years or so, is all based on Isaac Newton. His concept was that the world, the universe, was basically a clock. It was a machine. And this machine ran forward in time, and no matter what you did, you don't stop the clock. It's a mechanical universe. So if you want to make a change, you make an external change. Yeah? Does that make sense? You make an external change in order to make a change in the external universe. That's how we got ourselves into the mess that we're in right now. But it also got us into the level of technology that we also are in at the present time. So, like, for example, with gravity, he came up with the concepts of how gravity moves and spatial relationships. There was a lot of things that he did well, and it was the beginning of our technological age, basically. And that made the sciences that we have today. For example, his concept was, we look out into space and we see the planets. The big things and the small things were basically mirrors of one another. And he created laws for these things. So the stars were basically like the atoms, and the atoms were like the stars. And the left brain knowledge, all these mathematical formulas, they all basically came from Newton's formulas. I mean, a lot of people helped create all of this, but the original point was from Newton. When they got down to the atom, they had some problems, because the original concept was, like I said, they thought that the atom was like our solar system. Because we looked out at our solar system, we saw the sun in the middle, the planets going around, and so they expected the atoms to look kind of the same because they kind of had the same properties, like the big things and the small things. The problem they ran into is that the mathematics didn't work. And that was basically the beginning point of quantum mechanics. The idea of quantum mechanics was to try to quantify very, very, very small things, like subatomic particles and atoms. And they didn't behave the same way as planets did. Like, for example, when we take a telescope and we dial in, now of course we use computers, we can use coordinates, and we put in the coordinates and we say, okay, Saturn is going to be right here at this time tonight. And they punch it in, and sure enough, you look in the telescope and you see Saturn 100% of the time. It just works, and that's Newtonian physics. With quantum physics, they said, okay, it should work just like that with the telescope. So we'll look at the atom, and we want to look at the electron, and we should probably be able to figure out, let's see, if it's going around in this direction, at this time it should be right there. The problem is it didn't work. It wouldn't show up. Sometimes it would, but sometimes it wouldn't. So they had to develop a mathematics and a concept, a totally different concept, about how to determine where this electron would show up. And that was the law of probabilities. They could determine most probably, where these electrons would show up, but they couldn't say for certain. And that's where we got into this no man's land, somewhere between Newtonian physics that was completely predictable and these quantum ideas of probabilities. Now, Einstein came up, this was during the time of Einstein, and he said, look, God doesn't play dice with the universe. This can't be true. So he got together with two other physicists, Podolsky and Rosen, and they decided they were going to prove that quantum physics, once and for all, didn't exist and it doesn't work. So they did what's called the EPR experiment. It was a thought experiment between three people, Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen, and they ended up proving that it worked. He came to the conclusion that God must be playing dice with the universe. So this was proven later. Oh, this is an example. So this is now the new concept of quantum physics. The proton is in the middle, and the electron is more like in a cloud state. It isn't like a planet going around the sun. It's more like in this infinite field of possibilities. And most probably, it will be in a specific place at a specific time. And then this cloud, they call it the collapse of the wave function. Now, this is just one interpretation of quantum physics. The Copenhagen interpretation says that all at once, these infinite probabilities will collapse into this precise moment, and the electron will manifest and become physical now. The interesting thing that happened with that is that they found the electron wherever they looked 100% of the time. So how could it always collapse where they were looking for it? That doesn't make sense. So if they did their calculations and they had like 7 probabilities, but they're going to look for it over here, and it showed up there 100% of the time, or maybe they chose a different probability and it showed up there 100% of the time, what is the determining factor? Consciousness, the observer. Correct. The observer is what was causing the collapse of the wave function into the particle. That's one interpretation. The other interpretation is it's multiple realities, that we're living in an infinite number of parallel universes, and we jump into the universe where the atom, where that electron is already showing up as a particle. That's where it is. And in the other universes, it is not. Yeah, and consciousness determines which universe we're going to jump into. This is another interpretation. Which one I prefer, actually, because I like multiple choices and I like multiple realities that I can jump into. So later, after the EPR experiment with Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen, John Bell came up with a way to prove that this was true in the physical world. And so he came up with what's called Bell's theorem, and he came up with this idea, okay, if we take an electron, a photon, if we take a coupled photon and we split it in half and we send it in 2 directions, we can only measure one side at a time. We can only observe one side at a time, right? We can't look in 2 directions at the same time. But his theorem was, if this is true, what Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen said, now, let me step back one step. A photon has an interesting property. It can either behave as a wave, like, for example,